Some say the Orwellian Dark Age is now upon us. You decide. What you know about the globalists and the New World Order, or Old World Order, may be wrong. There is a unilateral, unipolar NWO cabal of interworkings between the major leaders of the world that show that, in fact, there are no black hats or white hats. In fact, they're all gray hats. The true globalist agenda is clear if you care to look at the publications of the globalists and understand how it affects you in your community. As far back as even before this, 1956, Nelson Rockefeller recruited Henry Kissinger and eventually had him sent to China under the guidance of Richard Nixon to implement the new policy of a long-term goal of making China the world economic leader and exporting the Chinese model to the rest of the world. This comes from their own publications, like I've said, and you can certainly take a look at those. A new world order, when it speaks of opportunity before America of helping to shape a new world order. Now, this is not a benevolent way of assisting countries to empower themselves to pull them out of third world poverty. It means exporting your jobs to foreign countries, exporting, in some cases, your inflation to third world countries, and giving up your means of production, which is one of the things that I do admire about Donald Trump's policies. Now, Trump is not exactly the messenger that I would like to have, but you know what they say, God works in mysterious ways, and some of the policies that he's going to implement and is implementing now behind the scenes are very key into helping us understand and pull out of some of these perils and pitfalls. But he is by no means a savior and by no means going to change this plan, especially with only an 8-year term, which, as we all know, usually oscillates from right and left, Republican and Democrat, but their agenda ultimately internationally is the exact same as it's always been. An essential component of the increasingly liberal United States trade policy, which will permit all other nations to sell in American markets, and that's key, sell in American markets at no tax and no tariffs. Up until now, we hear the rhetoric from the Trump administration that is speaking reason. Anyone that says that protectionism is a bad thing, well, they should ask the Chinese how protectionism has made them powerful, and how it has grown China from a third world country into potentially a world leader in a lot of different areas. Nobody complains about China's protectionism. They only complain about America thinking about protectionism. Isn't that like the pot calling the kettle black? But again, they control the rhetoric and they control the focus. Now, when we have to look at the dialogue, we have to call a spade and come out and understand exactly what this means for all of us. The United States, in short, is challenged to so conduct itself as to bridge every other possible way the potential cleavage between East and West, okay? It's deeply concerning to the globalists that East and West not draw apart for lack of understanding or through failure to see clearly the underlying interests. Okay, they do not want tribalism, even though people are wired to be tribal. Of course, you're supposed to have your own home interest in the forefront. That's the only way that we build products and services and we advance societies, as to offer our best of the best to other countries around the world. You don't do it through this global so-called free trade policy, which has driven up the biggest deficit in U.S. history and the biggest trade deficit, in world history. We can hope for bonds of friendship and ties, interest with the East, but we must not let emotion or differences of ideology close the door to such possibilities of better relations with the Chinese people as may arise in years to come. That's why you don't hear a lot of drum beating. You don't hear a lot of anti-Chinese rhetoric, other than the occasional tongue-in-cheek reference to how China's manipulating their currency or manipulating trade. But really, these concessions were given to China a long time ago. The 1990s was when China really began to kick it in the tail. And now, of course, they're on another phase of the New Silk Road, which, if successful, will export their model to other countries around the world. And then pretty much the game is over. And that's no joke. Of course, you see here Kissinger in the 70s meeting with Premier Zhou Enlai in China, setting up what would become a bad deal for America and a bad deal really for most of the world. There are 5 publications that I'm going to leave here in the links that will allow you to read exactly what has been written decades and decades before. The plan was spelled out if anybody was willing to pay attention to it, and it's still going according to plan. Don't think for a second that any one of these leaders is not on the same page. Okay, they're all in the same club. The Chinese have been given concessions. World Trade Organization, they've been handed the mantle, so to speak, without the permission, of course, of any of the citizens living in the other countries. It's prophecy foretold. 5 facts you need to understand about the new global order. Here's 5 key ones to consider. China is in the process now of surpassing the United States economy by one measure. 35% of world growth from 2017 to 2019 will come from China, 18% from the U.S., 9% from India, 8% from Europe. That is huge. That is huge. Okay, by 2050, the top 5 largest global economies are most likely to be China, India, the U.S., Brazil, and Indonesia. This is NWO personified. And number 2, China is leading the largest urbanization of infrastructure development scheme on earth. They're exporting that to the rest of the world, okay? Already in its 5th year at $900 billion equivalent, One Belt, One Road, or New Silk Road, stretching to 65 countries. This is the biggest gamble they've ever taken, and it is a keystone to what the New World Order is attempting to do to implement their plan of a one world system worldwide. Now, China is set to become a global green powerhouse as well, and that is going to be quite a big move here. Simply because China is so dependent, of course, on manufacturing and it can't create enough energy for itself internally. So clean air, high-speed rail are keys, fully electric vehicles, and smart technology being invested in. That's still an area for growth. China is also getting a global pace in digital economy, including cashless. I just had a video on this, told you about their social credit system, which is a nightmare to consider because it basically turns us all into cattle, which is what we're classified as anyway. If you read the writings and you understand how we've been classified as being livestock, basically, less than human, is how we're considered to the world planners, so to speak. China universities are vaulting to the top of international rankings. Okay, they're now have quite a few within the top 200, and within 30 years they may have the top 5. And this is key to understand because China's growing their own world talent to be exported worldwide. And your nation may be giving concessions to the Chinese to have them come in and have urban projects for industrial parks, to have a lot of Chinese students and interns come in and do the jobs that were slated for your interns and your young people in your country. It's you know, pre-robot. I mean, it's even better in some ways than a robotic future where everything is automated. They're planning that now, and it's happening all over the United States. I can tell you that being away from the U.S. for so long and then coming back, that's one thing I noticed right away was that a lot of labor from China in the United States and taking jobs away from U.S. University interns, and that trend is most likely to continue.